let's see, 4:05 in the afternoon here, Friday, April the 12th, 2024. And as promised, it's time for County Conversations. And I have more guests than I anticipated because Commissioner French is here, and who I saw last night at the People's Forum. And Angie Klon is back, and we're going to talk about the Recompete grant. And Angie, you brought along a compatriot here, somebody new. You want to introduce Una?
This is Una Wirkebau. She is our new Recompete plan coordinator, and we just brought her on last month to help bring us home on the grant, and she will be also implementing it when we get it, or if we get it. Una likes to say when, so we're thinking positive.
Right,
but
be positive.
She'll be the one shepherding the programs once they are in place.
All right, and when you can get a little bit closer to that mic, it won't bite you. Okay, so you were just mentioning, however, that you are not totally new to SQM.
No, I am. I mean, I've never lived in SQM, but I did grow up on Bainbridge Island, so I'm well versed with the area. My family had a cabin in Brennan, and my parents were really good friends with the animal park here, and so I have many, many fond memories of the Olympic Peninsula growing up.
Probably used to go down and eat at the Three Crabs.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. When it was there. Well, the Three Crabs have made way for ecological restoration now.
That's important too.
As have road networks as well, which we talked about last night. We'll talk about that a little bit later, Mike, if we'd like to do that. But we're going to get an update on the Recompete grant because Angie was back here before. But Angie, why don't we start with sort of a recap of what the grant is before we talk about where we are now with it, all right?
Okay. Recompete is a large federal grant program. It's a pilot project program. It's focused on distressed areas that have persistent poverty. The metric it uses is prime age employment gap, so where our employment is higher than the national average for people 24 to 54. There was a phase one of this process that we applied for in October. There was 240, I believe, for phase one approval. And of those, 22 nationwide have been chosen as finalists to compete in this next phase two. Phase two's due April 25th. And then from there, they will choose probably 3 or 4, maybe 5, depending on how much each plan is asking for, and those plans will move forward to implementation.
Okay, and what kind of things can the grant be used for?
For workforce training, and providing wraparound service to remove barriers that people in that population need to handle to be able to come back into the workforce, childcare, just getting the skills and other items. And then we're also working on some job creation, which really focuses on really the infrastructure going on with job creation. We have the Port of Port Townsend expanding their boatyard. The Port of Port Angeles is working on some barging. We have ENRIC that is really trying to innovate the natural resource sector. And CRTC, which is working on special wood paneling, or ACLTs, and ADU kits that would use Macaw's wood and bring a bunch of jobs that way. And they work with DOD and work for auxiliary dwelling units as well.
Yeah, and because historically, Mike, I think we've seen this area, like a lot of rural areas, was subject to a lot of seasonal unemployment. When you're involved with logging or fishing and that sort of stuff, or farming, you would have a lot of seasonal unemployment. And then depending on location, a lot of places grew out of that. But we're not necessarily in an area where you can do industrial development that is dependent on on rail and highway and all
Right.
that sort of kind of transportation. And so we've got to look at different kind of things. And I think a lot of you mentioned there, Angie, sounded like looking at our natural environment base and what was here.
And I think you really hit the nail on the head as far as the connection issue. We came up with a byline for our grant, which is our theme is really we're trying to connect people and resources on land and sea, because this is in cooperation with Jefferson County that we're making this grant application. And one of the things we've recognized after working with all these different partners, both governments and nonprofits and private industry throughout that 2-county region, is we're really interconnected, all the work that we do, but we're also in a lot of ways very disconnected, being remote geographically, not having rail, kind of being, and so one of the things we're focusing on is how do we connect better, both between governments, between, nonprofit, private industry. How do we connect our workers to our employers better? How do we connect our employers to our workforce training, agencies better? And then how do we connect our goods and our resources to markets better? And so you can hear a lot of those bylines through a lot of those different projects.
Right. And of course, now a location like we've had, I think, kind of naturally, as sort of say the farming kind of drew down. Now the historic farming, the pasturing and the dairy farming, that sort of thing, we've seen a replacement with a lot of tourist-oriented farming, small farms, that sort of thing, a high value per acre kind of farming. But also, I think a lot of the historic economic development is focused on the tourism side, which again can be pretty seasonal.
Yep.
And that's
also going to be really small business dependent. And so it's not something where you have like a big industry, one business that's employing a lot of people. It's just a lot of little.
Right. And in my experience working in some rural areas where you've seen, and particularly in exurbs, which are sort of more remote suburbs. We're sort of an exurb of the Seattle area. And when you do have population growth, you do have at least a little demand there for HVAC kind of stuff and housing construction and all the things that go with that, flooring and gardening and all that kind of stuff. And so those small industrial developments like, 2,000 square foot plain vanilla little industrial parks, that sort of stuff. But again, it's all pretty small. But when you were talking about working together, reading here lately about a number of the other kind of grants that are coming in or business opportunities. We saw one where there was a business looking at doing carbon extraction from.
That was probably
from
minocarbon,
yep. Right.
And they're connected to our Natural Resources Innovation Center, which is, that's one of the main strategies that they're looking at, is how can we take the natural resources sector that we do have already and make it more 21st century, more carbon friendly, more climate friendly, and also find ways for the waste products to be useful products. And that's something where that kind of idea fits right in.
And, so you look at your location and say, what are the positives at it? Obviously, we've seen the sort of the topside repair building growing in the Port Angeles harbor there.
And Port Townsend as well.
Port Townsend as well. But also the connectivity and the networking. I don't know, Una, if that's part of what you're thinking about, because we've seen, again, these grants coming into the Peninsula College, and we were talking about the dental hygiene grant they're getting, but also some of the STEM grant monies that are coming in. And, what are the plans maybe for a little more networking in there, just getting together with the people who are, so you're not just stuck in a cubicle working on your grant and the grant reports and stuff. You're seeing what everybody else is doing and how you can know. Because in my experience in grant writing, the more people you get involved with in your particular grant, the more likelihood there is of success for it.
Oh, absolutely. Collaboration is absolutely key. And we're finding that the federal government especially, they're looking, if you don't have a collaborative coalition for your grant, there's almost 100% chance you're going to be turned down. They want to see that collaboration happening, and that's almost precisely the only things they're approving nowadays.
Right.
And especially for rural, it's imperative for everybody to work together, and it tends to be siloed, and we understand that because of the geographic challenges and just because that tends to be what happens, right? We have a project, we're going to work on it, and we're going to make sure it happens. That having that those conversations and those dialogues is really integral to our success.
Right. And then also, I think that they also look for what kind of local support is there.
Oh, yeah,
from,
for sure.
From the local governments, the county commissioners on board, or the city councils on board, or local area organizations, like fraternal groups and other kind of folks on board as well. So the general population, that kind of goes to where we were looking at last night at the forum about government communication and getting out there and telling people about the proposals that are happening and what they're about, so the more education there is, and so they get behind them.
Yeah, and one of the interesting things is because we have such a collaborative coalition, when we go to ask for those commitments or support letters, we're getting some really creative, community commitments from that. One of the ones that Clallam County came up with is, what the focus of this grant is people that are working age, meaning 25 to 54, but aren't in the workforce. And our theory, and I think the data kind of backs this up, is that some percentage of those folks, it's because they've had a substance use issue, and that's disconnected them from the workforce. And for the ones that make it through into recovery, we might have opioid settlement dollars that the county has received from settlements with opioid manufacturers that we can then use to support those people that have done the hard work of getting clean and getting through into recovery, and say, let's help connect you to a job.
And there's also a population that lives out there in Clallam Bay that they don't get around much, but they're a population that when they do get their freedom, will be out there looking for a job, right?
Yep.
So
Well, and
I'm talking about.
Took me a minute.
Yes, I'm talking about our inmates out there in Clallam Bay, and getting them trained and getting ready for do that and cut down on that recidivism.
Yep, and one part of that is connecting the employers with our workforce development folks, so that our employers can be open-minded and say, okay, with the right person, we're going to give them a chance, even though they have that record or something. But if they're trying to, turn their life around and do something, good, we want to support them.
Because obviously we were talking about, what does it take for economic development? There's location, there's resources, there's workforce. And, so building up that workforce is necessary, and the skills that are there, that's kind of what people are looking at. And when people move here with their, there's also, housing prices and crime rate in the schools and all that sort of stuff. It's people tend to forget that side of it a little bit, but the presidents and the owners of these companies that are looking to move here are people, and they have families, and their workers have families that they're looking to move here, and so the environment they're moving to is important for them.
Absolutely.
Not just the dollar bottom line, but also where their workers are going to live and how they're going to function. Summer night, it's 4:21 in the afternoon here at KSQM, your commercial-free listener-supported community radio for Sequim in the North Olympic Peninsula, and heard around the world 24/7, 365 on our website ksqmfm.com. It's Friday, April the 12th, 2024, 52 degrees, and the sun is out now. Hey, I told you it's coming. 74% humidity, 29.92, and the barometer wind out of the west-southwest at 4 miles an hour. We'll have the full weather forecast later on for you, but right now we're in the middle of county conversations with Commissioner Mike French, who's here today, and his guests are Angie and Una, and they're working on the Recompete grant from the feds. We're in the final stretch here. And again, our submittal for the last phase here is April 25th, you're saying? Yes. Well, this is sort of like that dreaded April 15th date. Now we've got April 25th to worry about as well. Okay, so, and do you have any idea how long the review might be before we hear?
They're telling us the end of summer. is when they will be making awards. So,
Okay.
of course, that's,
It's pretty open-ended.
yeah.
Yes,
That could mean November.
yes, and stuff. And so I know the local dental hygiene grant from First Peninsula College had the support of was it Patty or
Yeah, one of our senators, I
Patty
believe.
Murray was up there supporting that one. I haven't talked to her for a long time. You know, she was here with the transportation district for a long time ago, but so having some friends in Washington helps on those federal grants as well. And
It absolutely does. Especially when, the whole pilot project came to fruition because Derek Kilmer sponsored the bill.
Yeah.
So we have our representative, as the friend of the program.
Right.
We have state senators who are pretty highly ranked in the leadership. So I feel like if there's any political influence, it's in our favor.
yeah.
And we're the only Washington finalists.
Right. Now another part of grant writing, grant applications, beside local support and that sort of stuff, are a lot of times are like matching funds, either real dollars or some sort of matching labor or equipment or something else like that. Did we have to do something like that along the recompete grant?
Well, yes and no. What you normally think of a matching funds, we were not required to come up with. But one of the main things that they did want was letters of commitment, because they wanted more actions from local entities, and so it's more about those commitments to work with the programs than actual the legal word of matching. So, but
Right.
so they're looking for more of the buy-in and the everybody getting on board to use and cooperating together.
And those can be financial commitments. Those can be, in kind, or they can even be policy related. So we can ask our cities and our counties, are there policy changes that we can do to make it easier to open a childcare business or something like that?
and recruitment commitments from
What about from the private sector? Businesses
Oh, yeah.
who
Yes.
said we're eager to see people come in here and get them trained and that sort of thing.
yes, a lot of it is from the businesses are commitments to do recruiting using the recompete
The cohort,
workforce.
yeah.
The cohort of recompete to do their recruitments.
Okay, and of course another aspect of grant writing and stuff is data. How much data gathering did you have to do?
That's a
and
great
help
question.
with
I'm
that?
glad you asked that, because one of the struggles is we have this metric, which is the prime age employment gap, and we know we generally trail the national average by about 10 percentage points. So 10%. And if you look at the 2-county population, do you know how much that number is? It was
I think it was 2,700.
2,700 individuals. But
Over.
then how do we know who those people are? And so what we've done is we've created a partnership with the Washington State Employment Security Department, the Washington State Department of Social and Health Services, and then we've used, you're going to have to help me, the Washington State University School of...
It's WSU's, and it's their social and economic. Oh, now I've lost it. Social and Economic Studies Research Center.
Yeah, so there's
No,
researchers
science.
at WSU
Social and
that are
Economic
working
Science.
with our local economist, who is Dr. Dan Underwood, who's formerly a Peninsula College employee and has his own consulting firm, Olympus Consulting. So they're crunching the numbers from Employment Security Department and DSHS. They get access to that data in a anonymous enough form that we can use it, and then we can extrapolate from that data to figure out, well, who are these folks? How can we reach them? What are their demographics? What are their likely barriers to employment? And so there's a lot of work that's going on behind the scenes to do that data crunching right now. If we get the grant over the next 5 years, we also want to do some amount of we also want to have some amount of data muscle to say, we have these planned investments. How well are they working? And if
Well-
they're not working, we want to be able to kind of change stream.
That's what I was going to ask Una.
Yeah.
The next step here, grants always have deliverables, right? And reporting back to the people who gave you the grant. So what are your plans for that? What kind of deliverables have we promised on this one?
And there's a huge myriad of deliverables, and that's really the key, what Commissioner French just spoke about, being able to pivot. So like anything, it's a business plan, and each one of our projects has their own business plan. And we need to be able to quantify how many individuals we're actually assisting, how many businesses that we're helping grow. And then if it's not working, if our formula is not working, we need to be able to recognize that and change course. And I think that that's what makes this product out of EDA really unusual, is that they're very supportive in that concept. They want to make sure that those locations that are selected to move forward are really having a large impact on historical challenges.
Now, of course, we're talking about actual people going in and getting trained and doing actual jobs, right?
Yeah,
right? So
absolutely.
So they're going to have go to some site, right? So we're in a more rural area, and you got to get around here. And we're talking about people who may not necessarily have the wherewithal to have their own transportation. So how much on board are Jefferson and Clallam Transit on helping out with this?
Yeah, they're fantastic.
They're direct project partners. They've come up with a kind of a menu of options for us on how we can use their current system to support those individuals, what we could do to, kind of do their system plus, what funding it would it take to do small improvements, and then what would it take to do really large improvements. And so they gave us a good menu to choose from. And one of the great things is, in both examples, both transit agencies are kind of doing more than they historically have done. And so both of them are fare free. So it's really easy, there's not a barrier of having to pay a fare, but they also, in both cases, they have quite a bit more flexibility than they used to, as far as, in SQM, you call a van and it'll come and pick you up and take you anywhere in SQM.
Well, there's
Same with
that.
Forks.
And what about like a rideshare van?
Yep,
where
they have carpool vans. Yep.
Carpool vans.
And so they gave us, one of the menu options was to basically supplement the carpool van idea, which I think that's probably one of the options we'll choose.
Right, yeah, because you might want to get a bunch of people to one specific site. And
then one other idea that I think it was Colleen from our Clallam County EDC came up with, which I think rings really true, because I can think of examples in my life where it's true when I was younger, of a car repair fund. Because I think for a lot of people, I'm sure you've seen that data, that there's a shockingly large percentage of Americans that couldn't handle a surprise bill of $1,000.
Right.
And for some people, that's life-changing, right? And so if we could have kind of a car repair fund that could make, if someone can actually bring us the evidence and we can, verify it. So that's one of the ideas that we're kicking around of, I think that could be a very simple barrier for us to solve, but could be a real problem for someone if they're presented with that barrier.
Okay, great. Well, we're going to take another musical break here, if you guys don't mind, and then we come back. I might have a couple of questions from Commissioner French, because we were both at a People's Forum last night down at the Grange, talking about transparency in government and communication and outreach and education and those kind of things. I don't know if they were that broad, but I was thinking that broad.
Yeah.
And so we need to come back and talk a little bit about that, because there was one specific project that I think maybe we want to update our listeners on, that you've taken some action at the commissioner's level with. Right now, here's Natalie Cole and To Whom It May Concern. You're tuned to KSQM, your commercial-free, listener-supported community radio. Rich Hendrickson here. Thanks for tuning in to Richie's Place for Friday, April the 12th. It's 4:31, and we will be back shortly. Well, that's Nat's daughter, Miss Natalie Cole, with To Whom It May Concern. It's 4:35 in the afternoon here at KSQM, your commercial-free, listener-supported community radio. Thanks for tuning in, and it's County Conversations. Rich Hendrickson here. I've got County Commissioner Mike French here, and Angie and Una are here, and they've been talking about the Recompete grant that we're hoping, keeping our fingers crossed, that we get here to help build our workforce here in Clallam County and do some economic development to build with some of the other things we've seen lately coming in, along with One thing we didn't mention is the school district here has gotten some money for STEM work here at the SQM School District.
And we're proposing to partner with them on that too, actually. The recompete grant.
Yeah, it's got all networked together. Of course, one of the things to do is I've worked with before with economic development corporations and over in Yakima County or in Columbia County is you just get together with other people that are involved in the similar stuff and just meet and maybe bag lunch it and just network and say, okay, where are you in your projects? What's happening with you? And, I can help you out there. And, just the networking side is
It's
important.
great that you mentioned that too, because of this process, we've done that 2 different times, once earlier this month and once the previous month. And both times it was just the sitting down and talking and eating lunch or whatever together that was really valuable.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And Mike, we might do that with just the general public occasionally too.
Absolutely.
I mean, we might even do it in our community room back here. Just invite people to come in and talk about stuff. We had quite a few people last night at the Grange. Showed up for the People's Forum, and the general topic was transparency in government and people getting out there. And I was there as representing our newsroom here at KSQM, so I didn't get involved or throw in my 2 cents, which probably pleased everybody. But one thing I noticed, and of course this is nothing new for me to notice, but is real lack of knowledge among people about how local government works. And I think that's particularly true maybe in an area like this where we've had lots of people move here from other places, even from other states, may not know how things work here in Clallam County, don't know anything about the Growth Management Act or the Comprehensive Plan or the 6-year Transportation Improvement Plan. You hear 6-year Transportation Improvement Plan and you think, I'll have to wait 6 years before I can change anything on that.
Right.
No, you do that every year. And people asking, gee, the county commissioners, you ought to have a website for people to come in and see what your agenda is. Well, and what kind of
guess what
kind of secret meetings do you have, and things that you're doing behind there. So a lot of it is not just getting out there and telling people or putting the stuff out there. It's letting the people know where to go to get it, number one, and just basic education, knowing, for instance, the gentleman that ran the People's Forum, I spoke to him on the phone this morning, and he moved here fairly recently, lives in the urban growth area in the city of Sequim, but thought he was a city resident. He didn't understand the difference in the city boundary and the city urban growth boundary, and that sort of thing. And I think a lot of people are that way. And we've got the 2025 comprehensive plan updates being required. Of course, the comprehensive plans are plans that have a 20-year horizon on them, but you update them every year, but every 10 years typically there's a big update. And ours are due for Clallam County in 2025, but the cities and the county.
And the cities, yep.
And of course, all the comprehensive plans have got to match, get together. The cities and the counties have got to match. What the school district is doing, what the PUD is doing, has got to match with what we're doing. But rather than waiting until September of 2025 when you're ready to adopt the comprehensive plan and then getting people into your meetings, I think obviously a big key is how do we get people involved early?
Absolutely. Well, and I think, as you mentioned, there's a need for public education. And I think there's also, going to an event like we went to last night, it's also a good reminder to people like me who are on the inside, who are used to all these acronyms, all these plans. It's a good reminder that people engage with you on their level, and I need to be able to communicate with them, in a way that doesn't alienate them from the process. And so, that's always what I come back to is just because somebody doesn't know about the TIP or the, all these different acronyms or plans that we have, it doesn't mean that they don't deserve to be involved. They still have every right to be involved. And, so I thought it was a really good forum. And of course, I think that it's one of those things that, I mentioned this last night, we're kind of living through a change in how all humans communicate. It used to be, if you go back 30 years, that just communicating through the radio and through newspaper was sufficient, and you would hit 90% of your community and the word would spread. And now we're not sure, how do people want to have their communication? I think that, coming on radio and having a conversation with the public through the radio waves is a good way for a certain percentage of the population. There's another percentage that might want us to interact on social media. There's another percentage that might want to interact through, announcements in the newspaper or at the library or something like that. And so, it's a challenge for a local government to figure out, with the funds that we have, what's the best, and the time that we have, what's the best bang for our buck and for our time to get the word out.
Right. And people don't know about what has always been required for public noticing of certain projects, and that each community has its requirements that are spelled out in its code. And that has, small projects, you have your surrounding from the outside boundary of the property. You do a mailing to the adjacent property owners, which frankly, since computerized mapping and that sort of stuff has gotten easier.
Oh, yeah.
I don't have to hit the protractor out anymore and go down there and get the assessor's map out and color code all the lots. You can do it on the computer. But as we heard last night, for certain projects like Town Road, which was a very prominent topic last night, there's a lot more people impacted than just within the boundaries of the project, and how we get out and do that. And as people noticed, stories in the newspaper don't necessarily get out to them, and how so the
or they might feel like it's already too late once the story's in the newspaper for them to come and have an effect on the policy.
Right. And that's why I think, to know that, we are working on the comprehensive plans, and they have various elements within the comprehensive plan, the housing element, and there's a transportation element that needs to lay out your future road network, and that it's not just a wish list. You're supposed to say how you plan to pay for it, and how to accomplish it, and a time frame for it, and certain levels of service should be in there. For instance, if for every 1,000 people, how many police officers do you have, and how many police cars or cruisers do you have for police officers, and the same thing with fire departments, and also for the roads, when you're going to trigger those kind of things, and how now the county here and the city, I think, probably lagged behind in certain impact fees, and then all of a sudden you're catching up in the last few years, which has been a problem. And so, and historically in Washington State, and I think this kind of goes back to the way Washington State ran things, historically, a lot of the transportation dollars just came down from the state.
Right.
And it wasn't contingent upon local government to plan for those. They could just go to the state and get the money. And then the state starts running short of money, and there's no mechanisms that have been developed over years at the local level, such as a transportation impact fee as you're building things. And
cities have gone to transportation benefit districts, which I believe the city of Sequim and the city of Port Angeles have now.
There's a lot of different things,
but it's not really good funding mechanism for counties who have a property tax that's devoted to roads.
Right, you do that, or you do local improvement districts, and the timing on that, because if you try to do the local improvement district, say you build an area out or a subdivision, and you try to go, you wait until after all the properties are sold, then you have, say, 200 households to vote on the local improvement district. Whereas if you get it at the development level, you only have one developer to deal with.
Right.
So, it's all thinking about those kind of things.
Yeah. And then it's how do you balance the needs of new road construction versus road maintenance, which, a lot of the focus of the county road fund is how do we maintain the current system? And that's tough to do.
Right. And it all kind of goes back to your basic philosophy. You know, why are we having growth? Should we encourage growth? Are we benefiting for it? If we're not benefiting, why have it?
Yep.
And
And where should the growth be?
And who should pay for the growth? Should it be the growth paying for itself, or should the local residents pay for the growth that's impacting them?
And some of those are hard questions to answer, because there's some places where, in the city of Port Angeles, I think I was on the city council for a few years, and I think they would say, we want the growth at any cost. And there's other areas that would not say that, right? So that's where, local communities, they need to have their voice heard in creating that comprehensive plan, because you can't just have a one size fits all.
Yeah. And sometimes local governments or which are made up of local people and, individuals, particularly in rural areas, don't necessarily understand the leverage they have or the potential they have to ask for things. Like you're saying, it'd be great if we got this news story. It'll, generate some property taxes or sales taxes and that sort of stuff. Well, will it offset the impacts, and how do you do that? Or can we get some benefit out of it? Can we have them extend this road somewhere, or build us a new well, or expand the sewer plant?
Right. What's the infrastructure cost total going to be?
Right.
And that's tricky. And
now, the problem is getting the public involved in those early decisions, which all kind of lay themselves out in your comprehensive plan and in your zoning regulations and those sort of things, because people tend to wait until there's actually a project, a building permit happening. Yeah. And they don't see the stuff that happened before.
And I understand why. On some level, people are busy. They're living their lives, and they don't usually, get involved until they hear that, thing happen. But I think, and this came up last night. I think William Armacost from the city of Sequim, who's former mayor of Sequim, he mentioned that, before the medical assisted treatment, the Jamestown Healing Center was proposed, they would, he had been on the council for a little over a year, and they might have 6 people show up to a council meeting.
Right.
And then they had 300 show up to a council meeting. Right. And I feel that exact same way, that sometimes either when I was on the city council in Port Angeles or now as a county commissioner, there's some issues that it's like, boy, I wish people would care about this more.
Right.
I think we'd have a better outcome if people, and I mentioned this last night, that there's been issues where we didn't hear from the public until it was almost really right there ready to pass. And then when we heard from the public, we said, hey, wait, that's a really important perspective. We want to make sure we consider that. We might need to change the course of this legislation, but we were literally about to pass it, in 20 minutes if we hadn't heard that. So hearing that public input early, it's better for everyone. It reduces controversy, and many times, sometimes sometimes things are still going to be controversial, but if getting that input early is always better. It's going to be better for the public to be involved. It's better for the public officials too.
So I'll finally get to my point on all this, which is the fact that with the comprehensive plan update coming up, to me, one of the biggest components early on is developing your public involvement program, how you're going to do your public education and public outreach, and have that all laid out very early and do it later, instead of being well into your project and then deciding how we're going to tell the public about it. That's one of the earliest components we need to be working on is doing that.
I agree. And I will say that I feel optimistic about Clallam County's process, because our, still relatively new Deputy Director of Community Development, Holden Fleming, is, I think, a really thoughtful person when it comes to those public engagement processes. He's right now he's helping them do that agricultural accessory use. They've had a lot of engagements all around the county on that. And I think that having him kind of shepherding the comprehensive plan process along with some outside consultants, I'm pretty optimistic that we'll have a really good public outreach.
Okay. And so, therefore, KSQM is here to be part of all that at any time for you guys here with the Recompete grant, and you want to get the word out or any other thing that's happening at the county, and tell us about it and get involved with it. All right, so I'm going to hit Kent Wellborn and the Daily Almanac, and then after that we'll get to the weather, and I'll just say thank you guys for coming in, and we'll see you, Commissioner French, next month, or one of your compatriots back here at County Conversations, the second Friday of each month at the 4 o'clock hour, right here in KSQM, your commercial-free listener-supported community radio. And here's Kent Wellborn in the Daily Almanac.